Hey everybody, here we are at FUTO. As you know, we like to kind of let you know what's going on. Like we're always looking at issues in the tech industry. One of the things that a lot of people are talking about, a lot of hype we're seeing about is this app of everything. And this is, people are talking about this now, I think, because Elon Musk is talking about it. But, I think to start the app of everything, I think a lot of people are like, what does that even mean, app of everything? I think it's almost a Rorschach test for people. Like, what does app of everything mean to you? I think, I don't know. Let's start with Harpo. What does everything app mean to you?
Well, when I think of everything app, I think of an app that lets you install apps.
Okay.
Not like a store, but like kind of like an overlay system. So, in practice, probably not everything is written by one company. So it's kind of something that one company makes, and then other people can integrate with.
Okay.
That's what I think.
Yeah, that's what I think too. I mean, so let's just talk about some of the other things people are saying. I think a lot of people are looking at Elon Musk's history with payments and thinking that it's just basically Twitter plus payments is everything app or something like that. Let's just go ahead and like wrap up the discussion about what is the everything app. I agree with you. To me, it's always been, what if you're like writing apps that run inside another app? Well, that's, it's like an operating system lets you write apps without having to do a lot of work. A browser lets you write apps without, does even more work for you. But we've seen apps in the App Store that, are letting you create apps, mini apps inside them. And one of them is WeChat, right? So we, kind of, when I look at the history of this, WeChat is kind of like done the best job so far of kind of fulfilling this promise of app of everything.
Yeah, but I mean, they also integrate like all the conventional stuff, like, payments and messaging. But then, on top of that, they also have all these mini apps, which are like little, JavaScript mini apps. So if you want to order a taxi or something, you just install the DD app, and you can just do it all in one.
So I think, to me, the interesting thing about this is, maybe let's first start with the kind of how I see the history of this all. We have WeChat was first a communications app. It was like maybe a year or two behind WhatsApp in China. QQ turned into WeChat, as far as I understand. So you're starting from it's a little different than a standard operating system or browser, because you're starting from a position of people communicating with each other, which means you already have the social network in place, and you already have an identity in place, and I think that makes a huge difference.
Yeah, I mean, with these systems, when you kind of unify everything, at least from like an end user's perspective, it can make everything a lot easier. And that, like, oh, I opened this applet and I'm already logged in. Like, if I want to do some social integration, like it's already there. Like for the most part, on every every website, every other app, these all have different accounts. They all have different everything, different infrastructure, different.
Yeah, no, I mean, so if it is about identity, I mean, we've seen this before. We've seen Facebook tried to have little apps inside your Facebook feed where you would be able to play Farmville or whatever with your friends. So you could write a little game and it would like authentic, like you wouldn't have to worry. Kind of as a programmer, you have to do all this stuff to make an internet app with, like, you have to have a database, you have to have a login process, you have to have a password or some sort of authentication mechanism, you have to have account recovery. You can push all this off to an existing social network. Facebook tried this with their like games or Farmville type games. The app platforms themselves are trying to do this, right? And pushing it pretty strongly with Google ID, or that was Google ID and Apple ID, right? So they're giving you that single sign-on, but they're competing with each other at the same time. So it doesn't really work. They can't monopolize it as well as WeChat's been able to monopolize it.
Yeah, I also think that at least so far, these kind of everything apps have been, very proprietary and kind of centralizing forces. But I think even in open source land, it's kind of, it's possible to imagine something which would be kind of interesting. There's this thing kind of like with systems design where it becomes harder and harder to change certain things over time as operating systems have like standard interfaces, or Android might have these standardized sets of APIs, and once tons and tons of things use them, it's a lot harder to compete with them or change them, because you just have to build up. If you make up some Android competitor or some competitor to Linux and OS X or Mac OS and Windows, like you're not going to have any software support and stuff, so you're never going to be able to compete. But if you instead like add another layer on top, you can kind of make whatever abstractions you want, target those, and they're just like, they just run on anything else, which I think is like a kind of interesting possibility.
Yeah, right. So you can, what we're talking about here really is, looking at all the cruft that's built up over time for writing a browser app or even writing an app for iOS or Android, and smoothing that over. So if we were going to do something like this, we would want to do that. We would want to create maybe, some sort of framework that's just like a simple app framework for people to go into, program their app, and not have to worry about all this cruft that's accumulated over the years in terms of the interfaces, the APIs that programmers use, and kind of redefine a few things in kind of like a more sensible way, not have to get permission. Like WeChat is in a position where they can kind of do whatever they want, right? And they don't have to get permission from, a million stakeholders when they want to make a change. Honestly, WeChat itself that was the case in 2017 when WeChat launched mini apps. Probably WeChat has ossified itself quite a bit since then, just because they do have all these apps that they have to keep supporting with backwards compatibility. So it kind of, there's a nice opportunity here to maybe recreate, an infrastructure for apps to be programmed.
Yeah, I mean, I think, in some ways the web is really nice, and in some ways the web is really terrible. Like if you look at the modern browser APIs, like they, if you compare them to like a desktop app, like, the web provides a way to kind of like automatically get updates, provides a way to store data and, do network communications as sandboxing. If you open some website, you never have to worry about, your passwords all being stolen and your computer being taken over or getting some rootkit or something terrible like that. And then, but the hard part about the web apps is that a lot of times the APIs that they do have are just like really, really horrendous. Like if you wanted like a standard cross-platform or cross-browser way to do persistence, to like save to a file system or like use a database or something, like there's been a lot of there hasn't been anything that's been cross browser and supported, and that's like performant. Like the only thing that's really cross browser and is supported everywhere right now is IndexedDB, which is just really, really, really horrifically slow and difficult to work with. Whereas on a desktop app, like you lose all this automatic sandboxing, all these security mechanisms. Like on desktop Linux, there's essentially no security mechanisms whatsoever, but you can get good file performance, but not not the benefits of a web browser. Yeah, no, I mean,
I this has kind of been the story of my life, I would say, is there would be the kind of the browser advocates, who are just all in on, the browser is your app of everything. Anything you want to do, you can do with the browser, and you can do a progressive web app. This has been the promise for decades now, and it seems like I gave up on it myself a long time ago. I've always preferred kind of the app frameworks that Android or Google are providing, or doing desktop apps. You've been doing some web apps lately, and you've been dealing with some of these problems. It sounds like it's still not. It's still the case where you're going to have a much, much, much better app if you kind of go straight to the hardware and stuff.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, it's really not comparable, especially anything that has to do with disk access. But I mean, when you look at V8, like, the Chrome JavaScript engine, like V8 is fast, performant. Like if you're if you embed V8 directly into some C++ program and aren't using any of the browser APIs, like it's as performant as you could
Right.
possibly need. But it's all like the APIs to actually build anything that are really just kind of horrific to work with compared to native.
Yeah, I mean, that kind of reminds me of, what my experiences in this area most recently was. The last time I really tried to do anything on the web was with my company in San Jose. We tried to do a multiplayer game system that would have JavaScript games, and we started out trying to just use the web control to host the game. And the startup time was like 500 milli. It was like half a second to start up tic-tac-toe. It was just, kind of unacceptable. So, what you just said, taking V8 and just, you take that one component out of Chrome, which is something that Google's already done for you. Is that the team at Google who does V8 is awesome. They've made this wonderful open source thing called V8. It runs JavaScript code by itself. It's, probably adds, a couple megabytes to your app if you're, smart about how you embed it. And yeah, we got like 30 milliseconds instead of like half a second, 500 milliseconds. I went down to 30 milliseconds.
And like it's otherwise doing the same thing. Like you're writing to the screen and doing some network.
So would you, what would you do for rendering? If you were going to build an app of everything using V8, would you just use WebGL and like write your own components again, or would you like use the stuff that exists? Like I don't know what the landscape is right now for just kind of like doohickey buttons, check marks, scroll lists, stuff like that.
Yeah, I mean, I'd be really biased towards kind of going back and using predefined components for everything. Like I feel like early on with some of the older versions of Linux distributions, I remember everything kind of felt kind of uniform and native, and like you had not a lot of options in the UI. Like you could make a checkbox, you could make a list, you could make a text area, but everything kind of felt the same. If you look at like TK from a couple decades ago, like
right.
It's a very simple API. Most people would say it looks bad today, but it's very simple.
And it's fast.
You can theme it. It's fast. Right. I don't know if that would win in the marketplace, but if I was to do something, it would probably be more like that.
So Elon Musk is talking about this. Obviously, if he does app of everything, the way we're imagining, it'll be your Twitter ID. He's going to be pushing Twitter ID the same way that Facebook pushes Facebook ID, the same way Google, and like they all want to just own your identity. So let's talk about how we would not do that if we built the app of everything, or we would advocate other people building the app of everything not to do that. Like would you use the sovereign identity practices we have in like Polycentric for this, or?
Yeah, I mean, I think so. I mean, obviously, like as a root, like using a public-private key pair is pretty nice. And like one of the hard parts about public-private key management stuff is like, okay, especially if you have more than one app, it's like there's all these different keys everywhere. There's all these different, each app does something a little bit differently. But if you just have like one root key pair in your app, and then you want to sync to your new phone or something, you just like, hey, scan my app of everything. Scan this QR code on your other phone and sync them up, and then you just implicitly logged into everything. You don't have to synchronize like 20 different types of keys. Like I don't think that would be that bad.
Yeah, I mean it would be a lot like maybe this would be bad, but you could make it like Facebook was, where like you had the same, like all these different people would be writing little things that ran on your Facebook page, and your identity could span them if you chose to. Like I guess we would always want the user to be deciding how their identity is shared with other apps, obviously, but we would be doing kind of everything we can to make sure that we're adhering to our principles, which is we're not trying to own your identity. Like it's yours. You've got the private key, other people know your public key. Done.
You're talking about like the dangers of the everything app too. One of the things is that especially outside of maybe some open source implementation or some community version, you're kind of putting all your eggs in one basket. With if it's WeChat or if Facebook was even bigger than it turned out to be. It's very easy to imagine a world where there was Facebook, and then there was Facebook for hiring, and Facebook for marketing, and running your business is fully on Facebook, and it's like, well, if you can't integrate with Facebook, if Zuckerberg doesn't like you, or you're out of luck.
Yeah, sure. I mean, and all these things do. Anytime you talk about having mini apps, you have an app approval process and things like that. So you would certainly, need to be careful about making sure that you're not creating, a bad monopoly there.
It's actually, I mean, kind of when I compare the Everything app to like the status quo as it exists, though. Like there's iOS, there's and then Android, at least on mobile, and those are both controlled by one company, right? Like,
right.
They could, in theory, make things difficult for you. And they both control their app stores, and if you have an Everything app like with Sandbox mini apps, it's not really different than that. It's just one more layer that can.
Yeah, but I
go
mean,
after you.
Sure. Okay. So you create this layer that's an Everything app. I mean, if you build it right, you can build it so that, there's not a lot that there are always safety valves for a company if somebody's trying to take too much control, right? So if you have, the easiest thing on like let's talk about the app. And the app to me in America or in the West even, right, everywhere except China, it's Android and Google are the Everything app, and they actually do kind of provide everything, as much utility as WeChat provides to their mini app developers. But because it's a duopoly, it actually allows for us to have, things like WeChat also exist, which is probably a good thing. So I don't know. I don't know if I don't know. You worry about monopolies when something starts getting too powerful. So right now, if any of the big players try, like, this is why I'm kind of apprehensive about any of the big players trying to do the app of everything. I'd like to see a smaller player do it, and I'd like to see them also put in all those safety valves. The app approval, even let's go back to the Play Store. The Play Store is a huge lever of control. The App Store on Apple and the Play Store on Google is a huge lever of control that they have to really, really do anti-competitive things all the time.
That's one nice thing to say about the web is that you don't have to apply to anything.
Right.
Like, you buy a domain. There's dozens of places you can buy the domain.
Yeah.
Put up your website, and that's it. Anyone can access it. And,
right. So app of everything, you'd want to do those sorts of things for the App Store. You'd want to support multiple. You don't want to have a way for users to very easily change to a different App Store. All the things that we wish Google and Apple would do, you would want to do this for the Everything app. I mean, what I mean by the things I want Apple to do is, like, Apple should have the capability. People who own iPhones should have the capability to install apps that aren't approved by the App Store. They should be able to install alternative app stores. It would keep them honest. It would keep them from, perhaps, most of the time when they're taking an app out of the store, it's for the safety of their users. It's for the, for security. A lot of every now and then, though, they will just take out an app because it's anti-competitive. And they're like, because it's competitive to them. So that it's an anti-competitive tactic for them to take the apps out. Google has this to a lesser extent. Like, Google actually does let you install other app stores and other apps that they don't approve. And all the security can be done with software. I mean, it doesn't have to be done by a approval process. So WeChat's been huge in China for more than a decade now. They've been doing mini apps since 2017. Why don't we have an app of everything? Why haven't we seen anything like this from in the West? Why, Telegram could do this, Facebook could try to do this again. Obviously Google and Apple are doing this to the degree that they can. Twitter's talking about it. Why has nobody done this, do you think?
I'm really not sure. I don't.
Okay.
I feel like Facebook was well on the way to doing that, and then it just kind of stopped. I don't.
Yeah, I mean, Facebook. I remember the Farmville stuff really people started to get annoyed. Facebook did this whole virality kind of engineering with their UI and stuff to make it, and all these games were encouraged to be viral, and it just started to be annoying because everybody would be like, come look at my tomatoes and my farm. And it was like kind of weird. So Facebook kind of just like totally stripped all that stuff out. And they're probably maybe a little tepid about trying again. I think, it could be that this is just not something for our market. Like, just because, there might be some weird things that happened in China, in the sense that like they weren't able to get what they wanted from Apple and Google, so they might have had to do what they did with WeChat. Where here in America, all the app developers are pretty happy, just like, oh, we'll just write our app for, there's like these layers like Flutter and Electron, or not Electron, React Native now, that let you kind of try to write one app for both platforms. Maybe it's just everybody's kind of happy with the status quo in America, but I don't know. I mean, we could talk about like from ground zero, like what this would look like. Like, well, if you were going to start or do you think this is bad? Should we not like spill the beans?
I think there's a lot of things I would want in a.
Yeah.
If I were to have a checklist of features, there's quite a few things I would want. Like on one end, like if you look at like sandboxing mechanisms on pretty much every operating system, they're all kind of terrible. And I think it's really hard for you to balance like permission systems in a way that's not super annoying to most users, but at least for like a more paranoid or power user, like the permission systems could be a lot more complicated than they are. A simple example of this is, and there's kind of ways to replicate this with like weird proxy setups, but if you have an app and it's like a Facebook app, maybe it should only be able to connect to Facebook. And that'd be nice, right? Just like, here's the domains this app can connect to. Like in GrayJ, we kind of have this for the plugin system. You can say like, okay, this plugin is a YouTube plugin, so it can only connect to YouTube. Or the other thing is, if you look at like file systems, for example, on all the different operating systems, file systems are kind of like a terrible API in that they're not transactional. They pretty much have, you can't really query them. They don't really have any guarantees. Like if you write a bunch of files to a file system, there's really not a lot of guarantee about the safety of that. If it's atomic or not. And just doing everything through a database that can be like that, at least almost everything through a standard database that can be like synced between devices. That'd be nice. I'm sure I can think of a lot of other things. I don't know if there's anything that stands out to you.
I mean, I just like getting rid of the cruft, like fewer lines of code, like simpler APIs, more like, instead of having 20 ways to do things, you have kind of one way to do something, and it makes things a little bit more streamlined. So what does this look like from an engineering standpoint? You're building a native app that has V8 containers and you have a special format for your application, which is like, whatever, probably could be very similar to NPM or something, and your app gets installed, and it's got a bunch of, you're doing a lot of things that operating systems do when you're talking about security, just at the JavaScript level, I guess, right? Is that, do you worry at all about the security aspects of that? There's a lot of stuff that, the phone operating systems can do at a lower level to ensure security that you might not be able to do in user space, because we'd be stuck in user space.
Right? Anything the phone lets you do, you could just proxy that, right? Like, if you want to take a screenshot, like, you can have
sure.
Yeah, you can have like your own permission system on top of Android. So for example, like like network requests, like, you can just expose a socket API into your V8 sandbox, and then Android might have its own networking restrictions, or maybe it's forcing you to go through a VPN or something, but you can do your own layer of filtering if you make everything go through your own API. Like, I don't know, I can't think of what you wouldn't be able to do.
I'm just thinking of I don't know. There's always going to be things that you can do at a lower level that you can't do at a higher level. One of those. So let's talk about how bad iOS is, by the way, for this, because Apple does not want something like this to exist. Like, back in the day, they got very upset with Play-Doh even, because we had a list of games, and they were like, you should not have a list of games in an app, the only list of games should be in our app store. So
they shall be independent games.
Yeah, basically is what they. So one, iOS does not even let you allocate executable code. It does not let you allocate executable memory, which means that your JavaScript will be 5 times, 10 times slower than it would be as on a similar Android device, because Android is good and they let you allocate executable memory and do the
except for their browser.
Yes, their browser is. Yes, this is the anti-competitive stuff they do. So probably if you do this and you want it to be really nice, you probably have to limit yourself to Android, at least for now. I mean, Apple is always changing their tune, and the European Union's getting upset with them. So perhaps they'll stop being so anti-competitive, but they're not going to make it easy for you. They would have a conniption if you tried to do this. Now, how did WeChat get away with this? This is where it gets political. I think it's probably because WeChat, had made sure that Apple wanted access to the Chinese market. So WeChat had a strong negotiating stance for what they were allowed to do with their app. At the same time, I mean, I actually do not know if WeChat, they might just take the hit and have the
I don't think they're running like a bunch of super
they
fancy games in it.
And also, I mean, I think Android is much more prevalent in China than iOS. They probably don't. Maybe the apps don't even work on iOS. I tried using WeChat this morning, and unfortunately, I didn't get too far. And I think the American version of WeChat is very, very different than the Chinese version of WeChat too. I don't know. It's hard to know what people see in China. We'd love to. We should ask some people around here who have access, who are more into the Chinese culture, what it's like for them, I guess. Yeah. So hey, this is something we're thinking about. Obviously, everybody. We know lots of people who have explain things to us that sound very much like the app of everything. So this is something that lots of engineers think about over their careers. Many of us have grandiose schemes. They don't usually go anywhere, but maybe FUTO will try to do an app of everything. I don't know. We'll see. If you're interested in talking to us about this, if you actually have the chops as an engineer to build these sorts of things, we'd love to hear from you. And when I say chops, I mean, if your comfort zone is web apps or just, writing very high level inside kind of whatever sandbox you've been given, and you're not interested in kind of diving into and creating your own sandbox, just keep doing what you're doing. But, if you are hardcore and think this is cool, yeah, we'd love to hear from you.